If you want to stay on top of the competition in Black Ops Cold War Season 2, then you need to have these settings that will give you better FPS and better visibility. Hey guys, it's FourEyes or Dave here, welcome back to another video. Today we are on Cold War and we're taking a look at the best settings on PC for Cold War in Season 2. Season 2 just dropped and there's a whole load of new content I'm going to be covering on the channel over the next couple of days. Going to be just trying to grind out those videos, but today we're taking a look at the best settings because some of the settings have changed over time since I made my last setting back in the beta, and that video did really, really well for me. A lot of people left a lot of good comments on there saying that it really helped them out, so I'm coming back in with that knowledge, giving you the best settings with a breakdown of what every setting actually does and why we want to set it as I tell you to. If you do find this video informative and you may be new to the channel, then be sure to subscribe down below and click the notification bell so that you can be updated every time I upload a new video. So let's jump into the settings now. We're going to start off with a quick change in the audio settings if you haven't done this already, and that is to set your audio preset to high boost. In this game, the footsteps and sounds like people mantling, people dropping off of ledges and hitting the floor, a lot of those sounds actually sit in the high frequency range, so having high boost on means you can hear those kind of sounds a lot easier, and that's going to be useful whether you're playing pubs or whether you're playing like League, play competitive style as well. So definitely get that change in before we move on to the graphics, which is going to be the main focus of this video. So starting off with display mode, make sure you've got it on full screen. I know a lot of streamers might want to try using windowed full screen so that they can alt tab easier, or potentially you just like being able to alt tab easier like as you're playing the game. But full screen is going to give you the best input latency, best FPS overall, because the game is exclusively taking up your display and it's not trying to render things in the background basically. Monitor, set that to whichever monitor you want to game on. I game on my 1080p 240Hz monitor, and I have a 1440p 144Hz monitor to my left, which is my second monitor, but I game on my 1080p one just so I can get higher FPS. Refresh rate, 240Hz for me. You just want to set this to whatever the refresh rate of your monitor is. So if you've got a 144Hz monitor, you know what to do. You set it to 144Hz. If you're still gaming on a 60, then I feel sorry for you, but you would set it to 60 here. Make sure it's set exactly and you're not somehow sitting at a lower refresh rate than you should be. Gameplay VSync, we definitely don't want that on. That's going to try and limit your frame rate to your monitor's refresh rate. So if I was wanting to stay exactly at 240, which, I mean, I don't hit 240 all the time anyway, so it doesn't really matter too much. But if you were at 60 Hertz and you put VSync on, then you would be running at 60 FPS all the time, and you'd have a lot of input lag. Doesn't really work out very well. Typically, you want to use VSync in your NVIDIA control panel or the AMD equivalent when you're using something like G-Sync. But in-game, you definitely don't want it on. Menu VSync, same as. NVIDIA Reflex Low Latency, a really, really important setting. This you want to have set to enabled plus boosted. It gives you much better input latency across any game that it's implemented in. So this game, Warzone, Fortnite, it works really well across all of those games. You want to make sure that in your NVIDIA settings in your control panel, I've done a video on this in the past, you can go find that video. You want to make sure that NVIDIA Reflex Low Latency in there is disabled, and you want to enable it in game. That's the best way to get it set up so that it doesn't conflict, it doesn't lead to any kind of weird issues. That's the best way it's worked for me. Render resolution, just put it to 100 unless you're having some real serious issues with the game and you need to run it at lower resolution, in which case you could turn this down. But in general, there's no reason to super sample by turning this beyond 100%. Just set it to 100 and you'll be rendering at 100% of your resolution. Display resolution, you set this to the resolution of your monitor. Aspect ratio, automatic. No real reason to change this unless you want to try and play at some weird stretched res or something, but it doesn't really work well in this game, so I would leave it at automatic, which for me is 16:9, and it's probably going to be 16:9 for most of you guys who aren't running ultra-wide monitors. Next, let's go on to display. Colorblind modes, this is basically up to you guys. I run Deuteranopia because it works well for me because I am actually colorblind. A lot of people run colorblind settings because they want to just have better visibility, and that is genuinely a thing in Warzone especially, but I actually am colorblind, and so Deuteranopia helps me out a lot. Field of view, I would recommend having this at least 100. I think if you turn it up too high, like 120, you get a really, really wide field of view, but it makes the actual targets you're looking at like really, really small. So I run 103 in most of my games so that the game feels the same overall. ADS field of view, you want this to be set to affected. What this does is that your ADS field of view will be changed depending on what your field of view is set at. So by default, your field of view in this game is quite low, and then so when you ADS, you zoom really, really far in, which is useful, if you're just trying to make your target more prominent on your screen, but you lose so much FOV when you ADS. With ADS field of view set to affected, that wider field of view you've set now affects your ADS, so you get wider field of view in ADS as well as when you're not in ADS. It's really, really useful to have on. It actually reduces visual recall as well, so you'll find it a lot easier to stay on targets when you're ADS'd. And as it says, it doesn't apply to zooms with magnification over 4 times, so with those kind of scopes where you're zooming in and you're actually trying to get like really good target acquisition at range, this won't affect it anyway, so definitely put this on affected. Vehicle aiming field of view doesn't really matter too much, but I set it to affected because it's the same as the one previously. Brightness, I usually turn up the brightness a little bit on a lot of these games. It's always really, really dark. Even if you go by the guide they set here, it always feels too dark, so I've turned it up a bit. Frame rate limit, I've put this to custom, and then my gameplay custom frame rate limit, I've shoved that basically all the way to the right. I can shove it up more. I'm pretty sure this used to be 300 max, so maybe they've increased that, but there's no reason to have this on anything but unlimited, unless, once again, you're having problems with your system, and then potentially you could cap your frames in here. Menu custom frame rate limit, I turned this down in them because you don't need crazy FPS in the menu, and it means that my whole system just runs a bit smoother. It's not constantly trying to render the game at like 200 FPS. And then minimized game frame rate limit, I turn that down to 30, so that when I'm not in the game, when I'm trying to alt tab out and look at other things on my PC, once again, it lowers the usage of the game even further. There's no reason to have this on crazy high when you're not even looking at the game. Next, details and textures. So texture quality, I put to medium. If you like your game looking really, really nice, then you can turn this all the way up to ultra if you have the system that can cope with it. But medium is the lowest texture quality setting where you still get decent looking red dot sites. If you turn this even lower, you start getting really horrible blurred red dot sites that you basically can't use. So I would usually run textures just lowest to just get the max FPS, but in this game you have to run it on medium. Model quality, I put this to medium. As you can see on the side here, it just says adjust the smoothness of models in the environment. Higher quality will result in higher number of shapes. I just found that low made the game look really bad. It made it really hard to distinguish certain geometry when you were looking at it, so medium worked out best, and that's what I'd recommend you guys run. HD game textures and models. This is something which you can download if you want, but you'll see it says you have to set the texture quality ultra and the model quality to high to even use these anyway. I haven't downloaded them. If you're someone who really, really likes true high fidelity, then you can run this maybe for like single player or something, but for multiplayer there's really no need to run it. Special effects quality, medium, just set it to the lowest setting. Screen space reflection, something which we don't need. It doesn't actually help us out. It's not like reflections help us see people. It's just visual clutter, which we don't need in the game and won't help us play any better, so we turn that to disabled. Object view distance, this was one that actually really surprised me because the maps in this game aren't crazy big unless you're playing Fireteam, but I actually found that having this object view distance, anything lower than high, you started cutting off certain geometry at range, which is really, really bad because you start seeing things, or you start not seeing things that are actually there, and it becomes very, very weird. I've played rounds on Garrison where bits of the tank on like the other end of the map aren't spawning in when I've got the object view distance low. It's very, very strange. I would just turn this on high. It doesn't affect performance too bad anyway, and it will make sure that you're constantly seeing the map as it should be. And so if someone's holding an angle from a long distance, you don't have random rendering issues at distance. It's kind of hard to explain, but just put it on high and trust me on this one. Water tessellation disabled, not something which is going to be important to our game whatsoever. Shadow and lighting, volumetric lighting, I put this to low. It affects sunbeam and light beam effects, really. It's visual additions that are very unnecessary. Shadow quality, this is a bit of a contested one. I put mine on low purely for high FPS, but it does make the shadows look really bad in game. If you want to have slightly better shadows, put this on medium, and it will help you out a little bit. But shadows have always been something which affect FPS really heavily, so I would keep them on low if you want to get best FPS, put it on medium if you want slightly better shadows, but don't go above that. Dynamic shadows, we put this on all. As you can see, it allows dynamic objects to cast shadows like enemies. As you can see on the right here, enemies and actual like people running around will have shadows when you have this on, so you need to have dynamic shadows on all. Special effect shadows disabled and weapon shadow disabled. Visual clutter, lost FPS for literally no reason. Ray tracing, definitely disable this. Ray tracing is really, really cool, really, really awesome. A feature for so many different games, but when you're playing something and you're trying to try hard, you're trying to be competitive, ray tracing just eats FPS on Nvidia systems if you have a card that can do it. I've got my RTX 3070, and I've used this in the single player, and it's really, really cool, but in multiplayer, no, you turn all of these to disabled. DLSS, similar thing. It's not something which you need to have on. This can actually give you better performance, but it really reduces your visual fidelity overall, and it's unnecessary if you're using the other settings that I'm telling, so put that to disabled. Anti-Aliasing Quality, I put this to low. Disabled, there's just too many jaggies in this game. It makes the game really, really hard to see. There's a lot of visual kind of clutter in this game. In a good way, it's like, there's a lot of things to look at, but having disabled anti-aliasing really, really just... Oh, it's awful in this game. So I put it to low. That sets it to SMAA 1X. That's a good form of anti-aliasing. FXAA, which is where you set it to lowest, is very blurry. Filmic SMAA 1X just looks a bit more blurry than SMAA 1X. Honestly, I would put this to low or potentially high if you really want to push the system a bit more and get better anti-aliasing. But low gives that good balance of anti-aliasing and FPS, so it's what I go for. Ambient occlusion quality, disabled for sure. It's not something we need. Motion blur, yuck, get that off. Motion blur quality, we've disabled motion blur, so I don't even think this setting matters, but I've got it on low anyway. Subsurface scattering, really minor detail. It probably doesn't actually use much FPS having it on, but it also just adds nothing, so we turn it off. And order-independent transparency, similar to subsurface scattering, something you're never going to notice in most games, so just turn it to disabled. And finally, at the bottom, we've got the advanced area. Make sure you've got the VRAM usage target too high. There's no reason to not have it on high, unless potentially you're pushing your system too hard and you're running other applications in the background, in which case you'd probably want to turn this to maybe default or low. But when you're just playing the game and you want to grind out, shove this on high. Display gamma, there's a bit of a debate on this. When the game first came out, you would expect, you would put this on computer as for display gamma, because I'm playing on a PC, I'm playing on a monitor, I'm not playing on a TV. But apparently these were swapped around, and I've had better results having this on HD TV for Cold War. So potentially, if you're playing on a TV, you should have this on computer. If you're playing on a PC, you should have it on TV. I think they've got it the wrong way around. I don't know if they've ever changed it back, but I'm having better results running HD TV in terms of the colors and how the game looks and the lighting. So, yeah, try both of these out, see what works better for you. You might actually find that it works better for you having it on HD TV. And display adapter is just going to be my NVIDIA graphics card. And that's all the graphics settings. That's everything we wanted to cover. So we want to apply all these settings, and with this you're going to be getting much better frames, much better visibility overall, and overall better experience playing the game in Season 2 as we grind out for these new attachments on these new guns, playing the new map, playing gun game. There's a lot of new awesome stuff in the game to try out, and if you've enjoyed this video, then please do leave a like and subscribe down below for more videos from me in the future. Thanks very much. I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.